Well, you're going to hear a lot about comfrey from me, Symphytum officinale, because I love this herb. It really is an incredibly effective herb, and we're going to talk about some of the safety issues. I'm sure this is not a super uncommon herb, but I'm really concerned about it falling off the map and people being afraid of using it. And I think that would be a terrible shame because it's so effective, and I think its safety is really good, especially if we do it properly. So, of course, this is in the Boraginaceae family, and every plant in the Boraginaceae family has unsaturated pyrrolizine alkaloids. We'll look at those in more depth. Those are the constituents of concern. What's surprising to me is how little research there is on internal use of Symphytum, because it really is just quite consistently effective. And so I'm surprised by that. There's a fair bit of external research on external applications for like sprained ankles and stuff, but I do prefer to use the leaf internally. This, again, is one of the steps for mitigating toxicity. Definitely the Symphytum officinale species is the best one to use. It has been bred over time to be lower in the UPAs, just kind of unintentionally. People didn't know that's what they were doing. And I'm told there are UPA-free strains of this that have been bred. I don't know where you can get seeds of that. You might try Horizon Herbs or one of our other great seed companies. But let's see, one Symphytum officinale. So this, has got somewhat stiff hairs. It's a little bit bristly, but the non-officinale species that are sort of commoner weedy things or hybrids tend to have much pricklier hairs, or they'll even have prickles on the edges of the leaves. They're just kind of overall spinier, and that's a good message to me, like, stay away. You want this somewhat softer, not exactly soft, comfrey, Symphytum officinale. And of course, this herb contains allantoin, which is this little constituent here. Allantoin is what almost every species in the world makes uric acid into. Humans can't do that step. We are strange metabolic creatures. We can't make our own vitamin C. We can't degrade uric acid. But we can go to the moon and do all these other amazing things. So what a trade-off, huh? Anyway, so allantoin is a very, very common constituent, but it's particularly rich in comfrey. And so it's kind of a different sort of vulnerary or wound healing herb, and is an inflammation modulator, in that it has this definite proliferating effect. So it's not just decreasing inflammation, it really is kind of triggering new healthy cells to form. And this definitely happens in the esophagus, this definitely happens in the stomach. We're going to hear about it again in the peptic ulcer talk, and gastritis talk. The only other herb I know that's really close to this would probably be the Plantago lanceolata and Plantago major species, the ribwort and English plantain type species, which also have allantoin in them. And they're really not, we often call them demulcents, but they're really, when you make at least a hot tea or any kind of a tincture, they're really not demulcent. They're just kind of liquidy. There's not that many complex carbs. If you do a cold infusion, you will get somewhat of a demulcent extract. But anyway, these were just some kind of basic science studies showing that allantoin does have some of these healing effects. We're not just making it up or something. So that's a big part of what's going on. And here we have one of these more dangerous species of comfrey. It's actually a hybrid, Symphytum uplandicum, often called Russian comfrey. It has, you can see the much more obvious hairs. They're more spiny or more bristly. The leaves are smaller to some extent. And a lot of, I think this has been a lot of the problem in the research on toxicity, is that there's very little effort put into identifying what exactly was the plant that was at issue, and was it actually officinale or not. most papers just say that, but they give no evidence in support of it. And because Symphytum species hybridize fairly readily, because we know there's many different species that could be confused, especially when you're just dealing with chopped up leaf powder or something, it's really critical to look at that. So of course the constituents of concern are these unsaturated pyrrolizine alkaloids. And the unsaturated bit is important, and I'm really trying to get people to include that. It's already bad enough having to say and spell pyrrolizine alkaloids. I recognize that. But the unsaturated bit is important because saturated pyrrolizine alkaloids are non-toxic. And they're very, very common in the Asteraceae family. So, for example, Echinacea has them, but they're not the toxic kind. But the Boraginaceae family has these UPAs, and that double bond that we see in the right-hand ring is what makes it be unsaturated. So that's a key thing to look at in any structure. So if we start in kind of the middle of this diagram, intermedine and lycopsamine are two UPAs that are found in Symphytum. And it's actually surprising how difficult it is to get the literature on what exactly are the specific UPAs in any plant. In a lot of cases, they just haven't gotten to that level of detail. And it's important because not all UPAs are equally toxic. Some are much worse than others. And so lycopsamine and intermedine are not particularly bad, is what it looks like. So that may be, again, part of why Symphytum officinale is safer. Either it's been bred to only have these types, or that's what's in there anyway, and there's just not that much, and they're not so bad. I only showed you lycopsamine N-oxide, but intermedine also converts to an N-oxide form, and these N-oxides form both in the liver, and they also form in the plant. And a lot of papers fail to mention that they're looking for these or don't look for them at all, and they are potentially toxic. So it's really the totality of the UPAs and their N-oxide forms that are important to kind of, I don't know, calculate or look at. But you may have also noted that intermedine and lycopsamine are stereoisomers of each other. They differ only in the arrangement around that far right carbon where the hydroxyl group is either in the right or the left form. So they're very similar, but the body sees them as very different things. So anyway, ultimately, cytochrome 3A enzymes convert these various forms into this pyrrole intermediate. And this is the actual toxic form of the compounds. And intermedine does the same thing, I just didn't draw it on here. So the intermedine also goes to intermedine N-oxide, and then all three of those, and it goes to its acetyl intermediate. Anyway, those all form pyrroles. And those pyrroles basically break into DNA or protein. They stick to them, and then you have this damaged, really kind of mutated DNA. And usually that's happening in the liver, but it also happens quite extensively in the kidneys. And so that's why it causes cancer, and that's how it kills the cells and triggers kind of this fibrotic reaction. This damage is potentially permanent because it will trigger fibrosis. So if there's fibrotic tissue, the liver or kidney cells cannot regenerate into that space. And that does mean the damage from Humphrey's UPAs is potentially cumulative. Even if someone only has it once in a while, that it still may never go away. So with all that in mind, I do still use Comfrey. I still recommend it. We have to take steps to use it wisely and carefully. But I believe that the balance between risks and benefits is in favor of the benefits quite substantially. I've never had any patient in my practice have any problem attributable to Symphytum by using it very carefully. So one thing is that we can combine it with an opposing assistant, which is kind of the Chinese medicine lingo for an herb that basically decreases the toxicity of another herb. And I know with my students and a lot of people, they immediately think of milk thistle as sort of the classic liver herb that's going to protect against this, but there's really, I still have found no research on that issue. And it may be effective. That would be great. Nothing against milk thistle, but there is a study with glycyrrhiza. So this is what I would say is the best documented opposing assistant to use with comfrey. And of course, glycyrrhiza is great with esophagitis anyway. So this particular study, yes, it was in rats, so it's not even a human study, but it's the best we've got. They use retrorsine, which is not found in comfrey. It's found in other Boraginaceae family plants. It is much, much more toxic than lycopsamine or intermedine. So we're looking at a kind of worst-case scenario. And they found that giving the glycyrrhizin isolated from licorice could prevent damage from the pyrrolizine alkaloids. So we still have a ways to go to really figure this out. It did appear that glutathione was critical to detoxifying the pyrrole intermediates of EPAs. And of course, this is something the liver and kidneys and also can run out of. And sulfur is the key limiting element that's needed. So it's possible that N-acetylcysteine could help prevent EPA toxicity. There's some hints in the literature also about taurine and heparin for other reasons doing this. So anyway, glycyrrhiza I generally try to include with Symphytum in some form to try to prevent any kind of minor damage. I would not give this to anyone, comfrey that is, with serious liver or kidney disease if they're on particularly significantly hepatotoxic drugs, because that does step up the risk of danger pretty highly. 4 weeks continuously is the most I would use it, and usually it's 2 to 3. It really, depends. I have used it as long as 4. I've actually used it with someone as long as 8 weeks. Ideally, you can get versions of this that are certified UPA-free, where they've chemically extracted all the UPAs, or they've grown it from UPA-free material. So those are in the marketplace. And if you have that, then none of these warnings really matter. Just do whatever you want. If you can use a glycerate, you want to really make sure it has an alkaline pH, because the alkaloids are not water soluble in an alkaline environment. The other option, which is kind of silly in my opinion, is to use a high alcohol tincture that's very acidic. Again, alkaloids are not soluble in this high alcohol, more lipophilic environment in an acid pH. So, but it just doesn't make sense because the acid isn't so great, or the acid or the alcohol aren't so great for the esophagitis in that case. And if you're using a liquid extract, I recommend 3 to 5 milliliters 3 times a day. If you're using crude herb or in tea, then you want to be thinking about in the 3 to 5 grams per day, in divided doses at least, and very likely even more than that. So this is to decrease inflammation, start getting healing going, and just has to be used wisely, but it's very helpful, very effective.